The Deep Space Monitoring Station in Antarctica was usually quiet at this time of night. Most of the staff were either sleeping or doing routine checks of their equipment. But on this cold winter evening, everything changed. Tom Parker, the night shift supervisor, nearly spilled his coffee when all the screens in the control room suddenly lit up with warnings. The radar systems were picking up thousands of objects entering the solar system near Pluto's orbit. At first, he thought it was a system malfunction. "Get me confirmation from the other stations," he ordered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Within minutes, reports started flooding in from monitoring stations across the globe. This was no malfunction. The objects were massive, some larger than Earth's biggest cities. They moved with purpose, maintaining perfect formation as they crossed the space between Neptune and Uranus. Whatever these things were, they weren't natural. "Sir," called out Richard from his monitoring station, "you need to see this." He pointed to his screen, where a strange signal pattern appeared. "It's being broadcast on all frequencies. I think they're trying to talk to us." Within an hour, Earth's Unified Defense Council gathered in their underground headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains. Military leaders, scientists, and government officials from every major nation sat around a massive circular table, their faces illuminated by the gentle blue glow of holographic displays. Commander James Miller stood at the head of the table, his gray hair and weathered face showing the weight of his 40 years in service. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what we're about to show you will change human history forever." The room darkened as a hologram appeared in the center of the table. It showed a being that looked almost human, but not quite. Its skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with an inner light. When it spoke, its words were automatically translated into every major Earth language. "People of Earth," the figure announced, its voice carrying an artificial smoothness, "I am High Admiral Venn of the Galactic Empire. Your world has been designated for integration into our dominion. Resistance is not advised. You have 48 standard hours to submit your surrender and prepare for your new role as Imperial subjects." The room erupted in chaos. Some officials shouted in anger, others in fear. A few began frantically typing on their tablets, sending messages to their respective governments. Commander Miller raised his hand for silence. "We've analyzed their fleet," he said calmly. "Over 10,000 ships, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent. Their smallest vessel could probably wipe out New York in seconds. Then we have no choice but to surrender," said one of the Chinese officials, his face pale. Miller's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly what they expect us to do, but they don't know everything about Earth. They don't know about Project SHIELD." Dr. Anna Ross stepped forward, her white lab coat standing out among the military uniforms. "The Empire's scans can't detect our defensive capabilities," she explained. "They see what they expect to see, a primitive world with basic space technology and nuclear weapons. But we're so much more than that," Miller added with a slight smile. "For 20 years, we've kept our greatest achievement hidden from ourselves and the stars. Now it's time to show them what humanity can do." The council spent the next several hours planning their response. As dawn broke over North America, they had their answer ready. Miller stood before the communication array, his uniform crisp and perfect, and sent their reply to the waiting Empire. "High Admiral Venn," he spoke clearly and confidently, "we have received your message and request additional time to prepare our response. As you can see, our world has many nations and cultures. We need time to reach a unified decision." The response came quickly. "You have an additional 24 hours. Use them wisely." As the transmission ended, Miller turned to Dr. Ross. "Begin powering up the SHIELD network, and send word to all stations. Operation Lighthouse is now active." Across the globe, hidden facilities hummed to life. Deep in mountains, beneath oceans, and in remote deserts, machines that had waited for decades began to wake up. Earth was preparing for its first interstellar war, but not in the way the Empire expected. The clock was ticking, And humanity was about to show the galaxy why you should never underestimate a species that had spent its entire history learning to survive against all odds. 20 years earlier, on a stormy night in the Swiss Alps, a discovery changed Earth's future forever. Inside a research facility carved into the mountain, Dr. Anna Ross was still awake, staring at her computer screen in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered, running the calculations again. The numbers didn't lie. Earth's magnetic field wasn't just protecting the planet from solar radiation, it was doing something impossible. She immediately called her research partner, Dr. Peter Wells, who arrived at the lab within an hour, his gray hair messy from sleep. "Show me," was all he said. Together, they watched as their instruments detected patterns in Earth's magnetic field that defied normal physics. The field wasn't just deflecting energy. It was absorbing it, storing it, and could potentially redirect it. "If we could control this," Peter's voice trailed off, "we could create the perfect defense system." Anna finished his thought. "A shield that doesn't just block attacks but turns them back on the attacker." Within days, the facility was swarming with scientists and military officials from around the world. The discovery was too important to keep secret, but also too dangerous to let any single nation control it. For the first time in human history, every major world power agreed on something. This technology had to be developed together, in secret, to protect the entire planet. Commander Miller, then a young colonel, was put in charge of security. "We're not building a weapon," he told his team. "We're building humanity's insurance policy." The project was hidden in plain sight. Hundreds of facilities were built around the world, disguised as clean energy research centers. Each one housed a piece of the planetary shield network. The public thought they were seeing the birth of a new green energy revolution. Nobody suspected they were watching Earth's greatest defense system being assembled. Deep underground, the real work continued. Scientists discovered they could use the Earth's natural magnetic field as a foundation and enhance it with their technology. They built generators that could strengthen and control this field, creating an invisible barrier around the planet. "The beauty of it," Dr. Ross explained during one briefing, "is that stronger attacks actually make our shield stronger. The more energy they throw at us, the more we can throw back." There were failures along the way. The first test in the Australian outback melted all their equipment. A second attempt in the Sahara created strange lights in the sky that had to be explained away as aurora borealis. But with each failure, they learned and improved. The hardest part was keeping it secret. When satellites detected strange energy readings, they blamed solar flares. When ships and planes reported instrument problems near test sites, they blamed electromagnetic disturbances from deep-sea vents or atmospheric phenomena. 10 years into the project, they had their first success. In a remote area of Antarctica, they successfully created a shield that could cover several square miles. 5 years later, they could protect an entire city. By the time they were done, they could shield the whole planet. Dr. Ross stood in the Antarctic control room, remembering those early days as she prepared the system for its first real test. The Empire's fleet was still waiting at the edge of the solar system, unaware of what they were about to face. "All shield generators report ready," announced Richard, who had been transferred from the monitoring station after the Empire's arrival. "Power levels are optimal." On screens around the room, green dots showed the status of shield generators around the world. From the depths of the oceans to mountain peaks, from dense jungles to frozen tundra, humanity's secret weapon was ready. "Begin power-up sequence," Dr. Ross ordered. "Keeping power levels at minimum until needed. We don't want them detecting anything unusual." Across the planet, hidden facilities hummed quietly to life. The magnetic field around Earth strengthened just slightly, not enough for the Empire to notice, but enough to be ready. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Commander Miller watched the system status reports with satisfaction. 20 years of preparation, he said quietly. Let's hope it was enough. The Empire had given Earth 72 hours to surrender. They had no idea they were about to attack a planet that had spent 2 decades preparing specifically for this moment. The Imperial shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a silver arrow, its metallic surface gleaming in the morning sun. Fighter jets escorted it to the designated landing zone, a cleared area in front of the United Nations building in New York. Inside the UN's main conference hall, representatives from every nation waited nervously. Commander Miller stood at attention near the main entrance, watching as Imperial Ambassador Lord Marcus entered the room. The ambassador looked almost human, except for his height. He was nearly 8 feet tall, and his skin had a slight bluish tint that seemed to shimmer under the lights. "Greetings, primitives," Lord Marcus said, his translator converting his words into perfect English. "I trust you've had enough time to consider your situation." Miller noticed how the ambassador didn't bother to hide his contempt. Like many empires before, they had already decided Earth wasn't worth respecting. The UN Secretary-General stepped forward. "We would like to understand more about what integration into your empire means for our people," she said carefully. Lord Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. He pulled out a small device that projected a massive hologram showing thousands of worlds. The Galactic Empire spans over 10,000 inhabited planets. Earth will be but a tiny part of our glory. The hologram zoomed in on various worlds. Some showed massive cities that stretched into the clouds. Others displayed huge mining operations that covered entire continents. "Your planet has resources we need," Marcus continued. "Your people will be put to work extracting them. Those who prove themselves loyal and capable will be allowed to join Imperial society. In time, some might even be permitted to leave Earth." A murmur of anger rippled through the human delegates. Miller kept his face neutral, but inside he felt his anger rising. The Empire didn't want allies. They wanted slaves. "And if we refuse?" asked the Chinese representative, his voice steady. Marcus pressed another button on his device. The hologram changed to show a planet being bombarded from orbit. This was the world of Centauri Prime, 3 months ago. They also chose to refuse. The room fell silent as they watched the recording. Massive energy beams struck the planet's surface, turning cities into craters. "You have primitive nuclear weapons," Marcus said. "They will not save you. Your most powerful bombs would barely scratch our smallest ships. We have technology you cannot imagine." Dr. Ross, sitting in the back of the room, typed quietly on her tablet, running scans of the ambassador and his technology. Every word, every demonstration was being analyzed. The Empire was giving away more than they realized. "We need time to discuss this among ourselves," the Secretary-General said. "Our world has many nations, many leaders. We cannot make this decision lightly." Marcus laughed. "You still don't understand. This is not a negotiation. You have 12 hours left to surrender. After that, we will begin military operations." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and don't bother trying to resist. Earth is the last independent world in this sector of space. All your neighbors are already part of the Empire." After the ambassador left, the room erupted in heated discussion. Miller slipped away to a secure room with Dr. Ross and key military leaders. "Their energy weapons are exactly what we hoped for," Dr. Ross said, showing them her readings. "The shield will be able to absorb and redirect their attacks." "What about their other technology?" Miller asked. "Advanced, but not magic. They rely heavily on energy-based systems. If we can disrupt those." She left the sentence hanging. Miller nodded. "Send word to all shield stations. Begin full power-up sequence, but keep it masked until my signal." He turned to face the others. "The Empire thinks they're dealing with scared primitives who will surrender to save themselves. Let them think that. In 12 hours, they're going to learn why you should never corner a species that evolved as both predator and prey." As the orders went out, hidden facilities around the world began powering up to full capacity. The Earth's magnetic field strengthened just slightly, unnoticed by the Imperial ships in orbit. Humanity was ready for the greatest fight in its history, and they had a few surprises prepared for their unwelcome visitors. The 12 hours passed quickly. Commander Miller stood in the Global Defense Center, watching as hundreds of Imperial ships moved into attack position around Earth. Their massive shapes blocked out the stars, casting dark shadows on the planet below. "They're right where we want them," Dr. Ross said, her eyes fixed on the monitoring screens. All around the room, technicians worked at their stations, keeping Earth's shield network hidden but ready. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. Lord Marcus's face appeared, wearing an expression of smug satisfaction. "Your time has expired," he announced. "Since you have chosen not to surrender peacefully, we will now demonstrate our power. Perhaps after your largest city is destroyed, you will be more reasonable." The transmission cut off. Radar stations detected multiple ships moving into position above New York City. "All shield stations report ready," Richard called out from his station. "Power levels at maximum." Miller took a deep breath. "Let them fire first. Let's see what they've got." On screens around the room, they watched as the Imperial ships charged their weapons. Massive energy readings appeared on their sensors as the ships prepared to fire. "Energy spike detected," someone shouted. "They're launching their attack." Brilliant beams of light shot down from the Imperial ships, powerful enough to vaporize the entire city. But when they reached the upper atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The energy beams hit Earth's invisible shield and stopped. Instead of destroying the city below, they spread out across the shield's surface like ripples in a pond. The more energy the Empire poured into their attack, the brighter the shield glowed. In orbit, the Imperial ships continued firing, not realizing that every shot was making Earth's defenses stronger. "Shield power at 120% and rising," Dr. Ross reported, trying to hide her excitement. "The absorption rate is better than we predicted." Miller allowed himself a small smile. "Send them a message. Tell them New York seems to be intact, and ask if they'd like to try again." The response was immediate. More ships moved into position, firing even more powerful weapons. The shield lit up like a second sun as it absorbed the tremendous energy. "Shield power now at 200%, Dr. Ross announced. "We're ready for the counterstrike." Miller nodded. "Target their lid ship. Show them what their own energy feels like." Dr. Ross pressed a sequence of commands. The shield changed frequency, and all the absorbed energy focused into a single point. A massive beam of pure energy shot up from Earth's surface, striking the Empire's lead ship. The Imperial vessel, designed to deliver devastation but not receive it, didn't stand a chance. The beam cut through its shields like they weren't there and split the ship in half. Silence fell over the command center as they watched the mighty Imperial ship break apart in orbit. No one had ever destroyed an Imperial capital ship before. Suddenly, their screens filled with panicked transmissions from the Imperial fleet. Their perfect formation broke apart as ships scrambled to reposition themselves. "They're pulling back," Richard reported. "All ships are moving to a higher orbit." A new transmission came in. This time, Lord Marcus's face showed fear instead of confidence. What kind of weapons are you using?" Miller stepped forward. "No weapons, Ambassador. We simply returned the energy you sent us. You should be more careful where you point those ships of yours." As the transmission ended, cheers erupted throughout the command center. But Miller quickly restored order. "This isn't over," he reminded them. "The Empire won't give up after one defeat. They'll be back with a new plan." Dr. Ross nodded in agreement. "But now they know we're not helpless, and we've barely shown them what Earth can really do." Around the world, people who had been hiding in bunkers emerged to find their cities untouched. Videos of the shield's golden glow were already spreading across the internet. For the first time in history, humanity had stood up to the Empire and won. The first battle was over, But the war for Earth's freedom was just beginning. News of Earth's victory spread through the galaxy faster than the Empire could contain it. On thousands of conquered worlds, people gathered in secret to watch grainy footage of the Imperial fleet's defeat. For the first time in centuries, someone had successfully stood against the Empire's might. 3 days after the battle, Earth's Defense Command received an unexpected message. It came through old radio frequencies the Empire didn't monitor. "They're trying to contact us," Richard reported from his station. "It's not from the Imperial fleet. The signal's coming from multiple planets in nearby systems." Commander Miller and Dr. Ross gathered around the communication screen. The face that appeared belonged to a being with green-tinted skin and silver eyes. "I am Captain Reed of the Free World's Resistance," the figure said. "We've been fighting the Empire in secret for decades. What you did, it changes everything." More messages followed. Resistance leaders from dozens of worlds wanted to know how Earth had defeated the Imperial ships. Some had been fighting the Empire for generations. Others had been conquered so long ago they barely remembered freedom. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Earth's leaders held an emergency meeting. "We can't fight the Empire alone," Miller said, addressing the Council, "but with allies." He pointed to a map showing nearby star systems. "The Empire's grip is weaker than we thought. They rule through fear, and we've shown they can be beaten." Dr. Ross stepped forward. "Our shield technology can be adapted for other worlds. We can teach them to protect themselves." The Council debated through the night. Helping other worlds meant revealing their secrets, but staying alone meant eventual defeat. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Earth began sending encrypted technical data to resistance groups on other worlds. Dr. Ross worked with scientists from a dozen planets, teaching them how to use their own magnetic fields for defense. The Empire didn't sit idle. They launched attacks on several worlds they suspected of communicating with Earth, but their harsh response only pushed more planets to join the growing rebellion. 1 month after Earth's first victory, the Resistance scored another. A small colony world called Haven activated their own shield, built from Earth's designs. When Imperial ships tried to punish them, their attacks failed just as they had at Earth. Shield technology spreading faster than expected. Read an intercepted Imperial message. "Recommend immediate action to contain situation." But it was too late. The knowledge was spreading from world to world, passed through secret networks built over centuries of oppression. Planets that had been under Imperial control for generations began quietly building their own defenses. Commander Miller coordinated with resistance leaders, helping them plan their moments of rebellion. "Don't reveal your shields until you have to," he advised. "Let them think they still have power over you. When the time comes, we'll all stand up together." The Empire grew desperate. They couldn't stop the flow of information between worlds. Every time they destroyed a resistance communication center, 3 more appeared. Their grip on power weakened with each passing day. 2 months after Earth's stand, the first coordinated rebellion began. On 50 worlds, shields flickered to life at the same moment. Imperial ships found themselves powerless against planets they had ruled for centuries. In the Earth Defense Center, Miller and Dr. Ross watched the reports come in. "It's really happening," she said quietly. "We're not just defending ourselves anymore. We're changing the galaxy." "The Empire thought they could bully us into submission," Miller replied. "Instead, they showed us just how many friends we had out there, waiting for a chance to fight back." A new message flashed on their screens. The Empire was gathering its entire fleet. Every ship they had in the sector was being called in for one massive attack. "They're coming back," Richard announced. "Early estimates suggest over 100,000 ships." Miller straightened his uniform. "Good. Let them come. This time, we won't be fighting alone." Across the galaxy, newly freed worlds prepared their defenses. The Empire was about to learn that defeating one Earth was difficult, but defeating an alliance of free worlds united by Earth's example would be impossible. The Empire's fleet darkened the sky above Earth. 100,000 ships, their metal hulls blocking out the stars, had arrived for what they hoped would be their final attack. This was the largest fleet ever assembled in Imperial history. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Commander Miller studied the tactical display. "Their ships are arranged in attack formations," he reported. "This time, they're not just trying to scare us. They're here to end this." Dr. Ross worked at her station, coordinating with SHIELD facilities worldwide. "All SHIELD generators at maximum power," she announced. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." The main screen lit up with a transmission. Lord Marcus appeared, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood the Imperial High Command, tall figures in gleaming armor. "This rebellion ends today," Marcus declared. "Not just Earth, but every world that dared to follow your example will be punished. Surrender now, or we will destroy everything." Miller stepped forward. "We tried to be reasonable. We offered peace. You chose war. So be it," Marcus snarled. The transmission cut off. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Not just a few ships this time, but thousands firing together. The sky turned white with energy beams. Earth's shield flared to life, absorbing the massive attack. "Shield power rising fast," Dr. Ross called out. 200%, 300%, 400%. Her voice rose with excitement. "They're giving us more power than we've ever handled before." The command center shook as the Empire poured more energy into their attack. Warning lights flashed across control panels. Shield generators around the world strained under the enormous load. "Shield stability at 60% and dropping," Richard warned. "We can't take this much power." Dr. Ross's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Yes, we can. Rerouting power through secondary systems. Activating emergency generators." Miller watched the tactical display, waiting for the right moment. The Imperial ships had moved closer, trying to concentrate their fire. They were now in perfect position. "All stations," he commanded, "prepare for Operation Lighthouse." This was the plan they'd been preparing for. Instead of firing the absorbed energy at a single point, they would use Earth's entire shield as a weapon. "Shield power at 1,000%, Dr. Ross reported. "Ready on your command." Miller took a deep breath. "Execute Operation Lighthouse." The shield changed frequency. Instead of absorbing energy, it released everything it had stored, not in a beam, but in a massive pulse that expanded outward in all directions. The wave of energy caught the entire Imperial fleet at once. Thousands of ships lost power instantly as the pulse overloaded their systems. Others tried to jump to light speed but couldn't generate enough power. The mighty Imperial fleet, pride of the Empire, drifted helplessly in space. "Imperial ships showing massive power failures," Richard reported, his voice filled with awe. "Their weapons are offline. Life support systems running on backup power." On their screens, they watched as ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries now floated powerless above Earth. But Miller knew they couldn't celebrate yet. "Send the message to all Imperial ships," he ordered. "Tell them we'll provide emergency power to their life support systems if they surrender." Minutes passed as they waited for a response. Finally, a transmission came through. It wasn't from Lord Marcus or any of the usual Imperial commanders. Instead, an older officer appeared on screen. "This is Fleet Admiral Ward," he said tiredly. "To prevent further loss of life, the Imperial fleet surrenders to Earth and its allies." Cheers erupted throughout the command center. Dr. Ross hugged Richard, both of them crying with joy. But Miller remained focused on the screen. "A wise decision, Admiral," he replied. "Rescue ships are on their way to assist your crews." As Earth's ships moved to help their defeated enemies, news of the Empire's surrender spread across the galaxy. The greatest fleet in Imperial history had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by their own power turned against them. The war wasn't completely over. Parts of the Empire would keep fighting. But their grip on the galaxy was broken forever. And it had all started because one small planet had dared to say no. 1 year after the Great Battle, Earth had changed. Ships from 100 different worlds now visited freely, bringing new knowledge and cultures. The planet that had once been considered primitive was now the heart of the Free Worlds Alliance. Commander Miller, now Admiral Miller, stood at the window of the new Alliance headquarters in Geneva. Below him, humans walked alongside beings from distant stars, all working together to build something new. The latest report from the outer systems, Dr. Ross said, walking into his office. She looked tired but happy. In the past year, she had traveled to over 30 worlds, helping them build their own shield systems. 3 more Imperial sectors have joined the Alliance. Miller nodded, examining the holographic map floating above his desk. Nearly half the former Empire had already joined them, not through conquest, but by choice. And the shield technology? He asked. Being shared exactly as planned, she replied. Each world adapts it to their own planet's magnetic field. The Empire's remaining forces can't fight against an entire galaxy of shielded worlds. The door opened again, and Richard entered. He now led Earth's new interstellar communication network. Sir, the first graduating class is ready. They walked together to the newly built Academy of Planetary Defense. In the main hall, students from 50 different worlds sat in their graduation robes. Some looked human, others were completely different, but all were here to learn Earth's methods of defense. Miller took the stage to address them. When you return to your worlds, he said, looking at the diverse crowd, remember this. True strength isn't about having the biggest weapons. It's about protecting others and standing together. After the ceremony, they gathered in the command center for another important event. The last Imperial holdouts had requested peace talks. Lord Marcus, now representing the remnants of the Empire, appeared on the screen. He looked older, humbled by defeat. The Empire is prepared to recognize the independence of all worlds in the Free Alliance, he announced formally. And your fleet? Miller asked. Will remain within our reduced borders, Marcus replied. We have learned the cost of forcing our will on others. When the transmission ended, celebrations broke out across Earth and throughout Allied space. The war that had started with one planet's defiance was finally, truly over. Later that evening, Miller found Dr. Ross in her lab, already working on new improvements to the shield system. You know, he said, the Empire scientists still can't figure out how we did it. They had all this advanced technology, but they never thought to look at something as simple as a planet's natural magnetic field. Ross smiled. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones right in front of us. We just have to be willing to work together to find them. A young alien student entered the lab, carrying research data. Just a year ago, such a sight would have been impossible. Now it was everyday life. The Empire thought forcing everyone to be the same would make them stronger, Miller observed. Instead, it was our differences that made us unbeatable. Each world brings its own ideas, its own way of thinking. On the screens around them, reports continued to come in from across the galaxy. Trade routes were being established between formerly isolated worlds. Cultural exchanges were happening everywhere. The galaxy was coming alive with possibilities. There's still so much work to do, Ross said, looking at the massive amount of data flowing in from their allies. Miller nodded. But this time we're not doing it alone. And we never will be again. Outside the lab's window, the sun was setting over the new Alliance headquarters. Ships from distant worlds moved peacefully through the sky, their lights twinkling like new stars. Earth had started this journey alone, a single planet standing against an empire. They had ended it surrounded by friends and allies, proving that sometimes the strongest defense isn't a weapon at all. It's the willingness to help others stand up for themselves. In the end, the Empire had unintentionally given humanity the greatest gift possible. The chance to show that Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its defenses, but its ability to bring people together and inspire them to build something better.